Hello, it's June 4th here in Korea. You're watching the afternoon edition of Arirang News, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Kwon Jang-ho, and it's good to have you with us. North Korean senior official Kim Young-chul is back in Pyongyang after his meeting with President Trump last week. But although the North Korea-U.S. summit still seems to be on track for June 12th in Singapore, the meeting last week has left us with more questions than answers. Are the two sides any closer to a denuclearization deal? Has Trump possibly given up on a one-shot deal? Could they still be looking to reach an agreement to formally end the Korean War? And can all this be sorted out with only 8 days to go? We'll try to answer some of these questions with an expert in the studio later. But first, let's head over to our news centre, where Devin Whiting updates us on the latest developments. Devin?
Hi, Jang-ho. South Korean President Moon Jae-in is hosting the visiting president of the Philippines, Rodrigo Duterte, at the presidential Blue House as we speak. This is Mr. Duterte's first visit to South Korea as president. Our chief Blue House correspondent, Moon Gan-young, is live on the line for us. Gan-young, what can you tell us?
Well, Devin, you're absolutely right. This is the Philippine president's first visit to this country, although it will be Presidents Moon and Duterte's second bilateral summit after their first back in November last year on the sidelines of the 31st ASEAN summit in Manila. President Duterte arrived here at South Korea's top office roughly 10 minutes ago with his entourage, and really we were all sort of keen on finding out what this president, with his unique sense of fashion style, renowned for his signature leather jacket, of course, that's exactly what he wore as he landed at Incheon International yesterday, sporting all black, would be wearing to South Korea's presidential office. We haven't yet found out, but I think we actually did see him walking in his black leather jacket into the Blue House, but we will be seeing more of the footage in detail in a little bit. So the South Korean president greeted the Philippine president at the front steps of the main Blue House building just moments ago and watched the President Duterte sign the guest book.
Okay, so I guess at this point we're expecting that the two leaders will go ahead with their summit talks, right?
Absolutely, yeah. The two leaders during their bilateral summit are expected to discuss various issues of mutual concern, including, of course, the latest developments on the Korean Peninsula ahead of the North Korea-U.S. denuclearization summit next week, as well as strengthening ties in defense, trade, and people-to-people exchange. Now, this, as they near a new landmark in diplomatic relations, dates back to 1949. So next year will mark 70 years of diplomatic ties between Seoul and Manila. Now, as for issues in and around the Korean Peninsula, the Philippines has been extremely supportive of the Moon administration's efforts in the peaceful resolution of North Korea's nuclear issue and the settlement of lasting peace on the Korean Peninsula. So we could expect President Moon to show his appreciation for that to President Duterte. The Philippines has always highly assessed the South Korean president's role as instrumental in the latest de-escalation of tensions on the Korean Peninsula. Now, President Moon is also expected to seek the Southeast Asian country's support for his new Southern policy, which aims for more economic cooperation and exchange between South Korea and members of the ASEAN, and expresses hopes that this initiative designed to realize his administration's vision for a people-centered, peaceful community based on co-prosperity will contribute to the Philippines' Ambición Natin 2040. Now, Ambición Natin 2040 is President Duterte's drive to make the Philippines become a mid to high-income nation by year 2040 by creating a trustworthy, poverty-free, middle-class society. Now, also discussed will be how to ensure the interest, safety, and security of the Philippine nationals in South Korea and vice versa, of course. Presidents Moon and Duterte will then hold a joint media conference, which will be followed by a dinner banquet and cultural performances hosted by the South Korean president. Devin.
All right, thank you very much for that. Moon Gan-young reporting live from the Blue House. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's top aide, Kim Young-chul, will have arrived back in Pyongyang by now. He was seen at the main airport in Beijing earlier today, boarding a plane bound for the North Korean capital at around noon. As he walked to his gate, Kim did not respond to questions from reporters about his 4-day trip to the U.S. last week, during which he met with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and with President Trump himself. Kim Young-chul is a vice chairman of North Korea's Workers' Party Central Committee and head of a bureau that deals with inter-Korean relations. He had arrived in Beijing Sunday evening, and staying overnight, he may have met with Chinese officials to brief them on his meetings in New York and Washington. South Korean Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa spoke on the phone Monday with Secretary of State Pompeo just 3 days after their previous discussion last Friday. During the 15-minute phone call, Pompeo briefed Kang on the results of North Korean envoy Kim Young-chul's trip to the U.S. The diplomats also exchanged views on the upcoming North Korea-U.S. summit and agreed to keep working closely together even after the summit to achieve peace and denuclearization on the Korean peninsula. Kang later spoke on the phone with her Singaporean counterpart, Vivian Balakrishnan, and they agreed to cooperate closely to ensure the success of the North Korea talks in Singapore and to make the most of the ASEAN Regional Forum scheduled for August, where they'll further discuss matters related to the Korean peninsula. South Korea's top negotiator at the six-party talks will meet his Russian counterpart in Moscow on Tuesday to discuss the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. Seoul's foreign ministry says Special Representative for Korean Peninsula Peace and Security Affairs, Lee Do-hun, and Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister, Igor Morgulov, will share views on the current diplomatic situation as the historic North Korea-U.S. summit approaches, possibly reflecting on the Inter-Korean summit and the Russian foreign minister's visit to Pyongyang. They'll also discuss ways to cooperate in order to achieve denuclearization and lasting peace on the peninsula. And ahead of the North's summit with the U.S., an intelligence source here in South Korea says the regime may have replaced all three of its top three military officials, promoting younger, more moderate officials to take their place. Oh Jung-hee explains.
A major military reshuffle could have taken place within North Korea with all three of the regime's top military officials replaced. According to an intelligence source in South Korea, Pyongyang replaced its defense minister Park Young-sik with No Kwang-chol, who's been serving as a vice minister. The chief of the Korean People's Army's General Staff, Lee Myung-soo, has been replaced with Lee Young-gil, who was the deputy chief. This follows the news that Kim Jong-gak, the director of the General Political Bureau of the North Korean Army, had been replaced with Pyongyang Mayor Kim Soo-gil, confirmed last month through the North's state-run media. Some view that North Korea felt the need to bring about change in its military along with the diplomatic turnaround surrounding the Korean peninsula. Especially with next week's talks with the U.S., some watchers say Pyongyang could have wanted to clear hardliners out of the way and tame the armed forces. But others point out that distinguishing hardliners and softliners within the North Korean military is meaningless, as Kim Jong-un already reorganized the army 4 years ago. They say age is rather the reason for the reshuffle.
Park Young-sik and Lee Myung-soo came down to Panmunjom for the Inter-Korean summit in April, but they headed back to the north before finishing off the day's schedule. They are very old. They were born in 1930s and 40s, so they can't be out for even a day-long schedule.
South Korea's Unification Ministry was cautious in its comments and said the news about 2 out of the 3 officials hasn't been officially confirmed by the North. But the ministry said if true, this could have taken place at the North's Military Commission meeting last month.
Pyongyang reported that it held the first enlarged meeting of the ruling party's 7th Central Military Commission on May 18th and said it dealt with organizational matters like removing and appointing members of the commission and military organs.
The ministry added that if the news is true, it'll be unprecedented and said it'll keep a close eye on related movement. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines for this hour.
Kim Jong-un's top aide, Kim Young-chul, is expected to brief the North Korean leader on his recent trip to the U.S. and his meeting with President Donald Trump at the White House. Although signs point to progress during the talks, there still seems much to be resolved. Lee Ji-won has this report.
Kim Yong-chol, vice chairman of North Korea's ruling Workers' Party Central Committee, headed back to Pyongyang on Monday after his trip to the United States. Kim left New York City late Saturday afternoon local time and arrived in Beijing on Sunday en route to North Korea. He had arrived in New York City last Wednesday, holding 2 days of meetings with U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, including official high-level talks on Thursday. On Friday, he visited the White House and delivered a personal letter to U.S. President Donald Trump from North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, after which Trump announced that the June 12th summit in Singapore was back on. With the summit confirmation, the first major diplomatic hurdle seems to have been overcome, but significant differences remain between the two sides. Due to the range of complex issues at hand, President Trump has started hinting that the June 12th summit could actually be the first in a series of meetings between the two leaders.
We're not going to go in and sign something on June 12th. We never were. We're going to start a process. We can go fast, we can go slowly.
The extension of the Panmunjom talks, where U.S. delegates led by former nuclear negotiator Sung Kim held their fourth round of talks with North Korea on Sunday, shows much work is left to do, as indicated by Pompeo last week. Some experts say the difficulty lies in bridging the gap between what Kim and Trump can offer each other in the initial phase of negotiations.
The problem is we are in the very early stages. Trump wants big, bold promises on denuclearization from North Korea to persuade many of those skeptical of Pyongyang's true intentions. That could include a front-loaded agreement where the North gives up its nuclear weapons first. However, there's not much Trump can offer Kim at this time, as they would likely require congressional approval or would take a long time.
The expert says bringing an official end to the decades-long Korean War and taking North Korea off the state sponsor of terrorism list could be a couple of things Trump could offer. But as for economic support, the lifting of U.S. sanctions would almost certainly have to wait. Watchers say that might be why President Trump seemed to deflect much of the financial responsibility to the North's three closest neighbors, South Korea, Japan, and China, when he spoke to reporters after his meeting with Kim Yong-chol. 이지원, Arirang News.
Now, for a more in-depth analysis into these latest developments, we have with us Professor Kim Hyun-wook from the Korea National Diplomatic Academy. Professor Kim, it's good to have you with us again.
Thank you.
Now, as we saw in that last report, President Trump met with North Korean senior official Kim Yong-chol last week, but he interestingly said that a deal might not be reached in one go at the summit on June 12th, and that several meetings might be needed afterwards. Does this suggest that Trump has perhaps given up on a one-shot denuclearization deal that he talked about before, and possibly even going for some sort of phased approach that North Korea have been suggesting?
Well, I think ultimately, yes. I think the current, moves by the states to approach North Korean denuclearization seems to be a little bit more phased than the original plan of one-shot game. Because what the U.S. requested was to have all the maybe 20 nuclear warheads in North Korea to be taken out of North Korea and put in the territory of the United States. That's first phase, I would say. And afterwards, maybe the U.S. can provide some measures for the guarantee of the regime's security of Kim Jong-un. For example, normalizing the relations. And maybe, afterwards would be the CVID, which would take a lot of time. The reality of a CVID is that it would not be, achieved in 3 months or 6 months. That's a long process. So maybe the U.S. wants to have, nuclear warheads, maybe 20, warheads to be taken out of North Korea and put in the United States territory. So, having said all these things, maybe the phased approach would be more realistic than one-shot game. But I'm not sure what Trump mentioned. What is the purpose of Trump mentioning the process, the summit meeting to be processed, several meetings? I'm not sure what the intention is. Maybe he thinks of the realistic approach would be phased, or he's just looking into domestic politics. Okay, this is a phase. If he fails at the summit meeting, He knows that the damage in the domestic political arena, and maybe saying to the domestic audience that, okay, this is a process. He would not side in the first summit meeting, saying against what would not happen in the future.
Do you think he's finally realized how difficult it is to deal with North Korea and how big a problem this is, and how many administrations previously have tried, but this is the reasons why it's failed, because it is so difficult and there's so many complications here?
Yeah, maybe, because the reality is not that easy. And against what the U.S. has been arguing, for example, National Security Advisor Bolton, who has been dealing with Libya by himself, has been arguing the Libya model. I don't think the core of the Libya model is to denuclearize first, but to take all the nuclear, materials and weapons, out of Libya and put it in the United States. I think that's the core of Libya model, and I think that's what Bolton has been saying, because that is the quickest way to denuclearize North Korea. But even though that is the case, it's not easy to take out all the nuclear weapons inside North Korea. We have, the inspectors have to go in to the North Korea and check out, what is the entire amount of nuclear weapons that North Korea possesses, which is not easy unless there is a true intention of North Korea to denuclearize itself. So maybe knowing this reality, maybe Trump's, scenario might have changed a little bit.
Trump also mentioned that he talked about maybe agreeing on a declaration that formally ends the Korean War. What do you make of that development? Do you think it could be achieved?
Yes, after the Kim Young-cheol's meeting with Trump, President Trump mentioned a possibility of the declaration of the Korean War end, maybe by three parties, including South Korea. I was thinking why he's suddenly saying that. Maybe North Korea is kind of worrying about taking all the nuclear warheads at the first stance with no incentives received. So maybe North Korea wants to have some kinds of measures to guarantee its regime first. I don't know what kind of measures would be possible, but the declaring the end of Korean War in the Korean Peninsula, I think that will be one kind of measures for the regime security guarantee for North Korea before taking out all the nuclear warheads out of North Korea. Because three countries get together, North Korea, South Korea, U.S., declare the end of Korean War. The declaration itself might have some kind of specific insight. For example, the U.S. anti-North Korea policy would be abolished. There would be beginning of the normalizing the relationship, so on and so forth. And based upon that declaration, if the U.S. initiates all the measures altogether, along with taking out the nuclear warheads out of North Korea, I think that would, there would be some way to guarantee the regime security for North Korea, I think.
There's talk that the declaration might be signed the day after the US-North Korea summit, that there might be a trilateral summit with South Korea involved as well. How likely do you think that could be on the cards?
I think it depends upon whether two countries, North Korea and the US, can strike a deal on June 12th. I mean, if they agree upon denuclearization of North Korea, if two leaders come, talk, discuss, and finally sign the agreement at the end of the June 12th, I think that would possibly lead to the declaration of the end of the Korean War next day. And all these kinds of scenarios all depends upon how two countries discuss and come up with agreements in the working level discussions. Now Ambassador Sung Kim is now at Panmunjom to talk with all the details of denuclearizing North Korea. And we have only for about 9 days. And if those working level people come up with an agreement, within the 9 days, maybe South Korea can join the two leaders in Singapore for the declaration of the end of Korean War.
That's what I was going to ask you next about. Those working level talks in Panmunjom right now between North Korea and the US. They're said to be continuing for a fifth round today. It seems to be taking longer than we first expected. Should we take that as a good sign or a bad sign?
That's definitely a good sign because they were supposed to have some meetings at Panmunjom, but I think after second meeting it was a little bit paused, and I think they were waiting for some signals from Washington D.C. after Trump's meeting with Kim Young-chul. Kim Young-chul brought the letter from Kim Jong-un to President Trump. We don't know what is inside the letter, but I think after the meeting, Trump mentioned very positive things. Summit meeting will be processed. It will be a long process. Possibility of the declaration of the end of Korea, and all that kind of things, which signals that the big picture of agreement has been made between President Trump and Kim Young-chul. So I think based upon that, the Panmunjom, there will be more and more talks between Sung Kim and North Korean and head of delegations about how specifically they come up with agreements so that on June 12th, the two leaders finally could be signing at the agreement.
So another development that's coming out of North Korea at the moment, that there seems to be reports saying 3 of the regime's top military officers have been replaced. We're not sure what's happened, whether they've been fired or whether they've been retired. We're not really sure. But there are suggestions that even that Kim Jong-un was looking to silence any objections to his change in stance towards South Korea and the U.S. What do you think of this sudden change of leadership in North Korea right now?
Even in North Korea, there are a lot of people, military people, government people, bureaucrats who are worrying about the future of North Korea at this juncture. Kim Jong-un, the great leader, suddenly came up with the denuclearization slogan, talking that this would lead to a very great economically prosperous nation of North Korea. People are welcoming it, but at the same time, very conservative people within North Korea are worrying about these kinds of moves. What if we give up nuclear weapons? All these kinds of old conservative military people would be worrying about what Kim Jong-un is doing. That's the same in the United States. It is only President Trump himself that is pushing hard on the deal between in the summit meeting. Other people in Washington, D.C., elites, congressmen, experts, they are all concerned about what Trump is doing. What if Trump is doing something wrong for the sake of his own desire and achievement, political achievement? So same thing is happening inside North Korea. So even though Kim Jong-un, in his initial phase, purged a lot of military people and swifted the core of his power from the military to the Workers' Party, still in the military, there are people very conservative worrying about what Kim Jong-un is doing. So, this, purging and changing these 3 top military officers to be a signal to the military people. You just be calm down. This is my moves, my policies, so that no more objection will be arising against what Kim Jong-un is doing.
Possibly Kim Jong-un putting his foot down. So now there's only 8 days to go till the North Korea-U.S. summit, that's the date that's been scheduled anyway. We hope it's smooth sailing till then, but what are the things that could go wrong between then and now? I mean, what do you think the parties need to be careful of?
Still, there are some, strong hardline voices within the United States. When Trump and Kim Young-chul met, the Bolton, Spencer, the Vice President Pence and National Security Advisor, Bolton has been excluded from the meeting, which is a signal that they are very hardline. They would, influence what Trump would talk to Kim Young-chul. So Trump, I think, intentionally exclude them from the meeting with Kim Young-chul. So those voices within the United States, I think, could be some possible hurdles to the way to the summit meeting. Another thing I think is that we have to be careful about the role of China. Even though there might be possibility of 3 countries joining the declaration of the end of Korean War, China is very much worrying about itself to be excluded from it. It might not be excluded from the peace treaty, but it wants to be actively participate in the initial phase of discussions about the peace treaty discussions, which is the declaration of the end of Korean War. So I'm kind of worrying about China to have a negative role in dealing with all this kind of peacemaking process in the Korean Peninsula.
There's even talk of Xi Jinping coming to Singapore on June 12th. There were initial reports, but maybe it's not happening right now. What do you think?
If President Trump does not invite him to Singapore, he has no reason to be there. I don't think he will be there unless there is a formal invitation by President Trump and leader Kim Jong-un.
Thank you for your time there, Professor. That's all we have time for. Thank you for coming in as always.
Thank you.
Now that's where we'll wrap things up for now. We'll be back with more insights from our panel of experts tomorrow, but do stay tuned to Arirang for more updates throughout the day. Thank you for watching and do join us again next time. Goodbye.